Howdy, peeps, and welcome to another podcast of Talking Paranormal with the Old Man. And as usual, I am the old man. How y'all doing? Hope you have a good weekend. Unfortunately, I heard that they're getting more rain down in Tejas. Hopefully, that gets it's just a sad situation all the way around. So hopefully they don't get too much rain. But I was seeing this morning where they were saying that they're getting rain rates up to I think 3 or 4 inches per hour. That's just ridiculous. I mean, that's a lot of freaking rain. So hopefully everything gets better down there. They keep on finding victims and stuff so they can you know put everyone at rest and let people mourn and then move on. So anyways, and as a reminder, this upcoming weekend, which will be next Sunday, the 20th, our daughter is going to be here, or not be here, but we're going to go live. And hopefully we're going to go live. I don't know if we're going to for sure, but hopefully we're going to go live. So we're going to talk about our investigation in the Duran train depot. And that's where we saw the apparition on video. And Jessie had an experience. That's our daughter. Jessie had an experience up in the third floor ballroom that she kind of freaked out about. So hopefully, if all goes as planned, at noon on the 20th, a week from today, she'll be live. And from what I've read, I haven't gone live yet, but from what I've read, we can take phone calls. So hopefully, we have some listeners to listen and hopefully have some calls because that'd be kind of cool. Instead of listening to us talk all the time, it'd be kind of cool to have someone to talk, have questions. It'd be kind of cool. And I don't have my stats handy, but I think it's kind of cool. Uh, since June, my downloads are up like 200 and some percent, and my listeners are up like 225%. So I thank you for that. Just starting out, we've been doing this since January, or I've been doing this since January. So just starting out, and I enjoy talking about the paranormal. It's just just how it is. Been doing this for a long time. So today's podcast is going to be about how I got involved in the paranormal. A lot of people have asked me, and I am serious when I say this. A lot of people have asked me. We do presentations every year, usually October. Is a like a 2 hour PowerPoint, and we show audio and video and pictures of our investigations. I tell stories about our investigations, and a lot of people ask me, how did you get involved in the paranormal? So this podcast, I'm going to talk about how I got involved. It's pretty straightforward, and then I guess I will, even though I covered this in the first podcast, I think I will parlay into or transition into talking about how I got involved in the paranormal. Of course, the spook house that we lived in, that's what started the whole thing. And then how that transitioned into this group that we have now. So it's going to be kind of like a, transition to the spook house into how I got involved in this group. Excuse me. I'm drinking pop here trying to stay cool. And I'm burping. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I am burping. So, how did I get started in the paranormal? Well, that's pretty simple. When I was young, and I don't remember the house. I was like, shit, I think 2 or 3 years old. I think maybe tops. Um, we lived in a haunted house. It'll be from here on out referred to as the spook house because that's what we called it, was the spook house. And from what I remember being described to me, there was, as you walked in the front door, you're in the living room. The north, or I'm sorry, left hand corner, upper left hand corner was a doorway into the kitchen. From the kitchen, there was a door to the actual basement. And then if you're back at the front door and turned a little bit to the right, there was a hallway. And from my understanding, mom and dad's bedroom was the first room on the right. If you go down the hallway, the second one was the bathroom, I think. And then there was a bedroom at the end of the hallway. Now that could have been switched where the bathroom was at the end of the hallway and the second room down the hallway on the right was my room. So either way, either the second room on the right was my room or it was the shitter. Either one, I don't remember. So for the sake of clarity, we'll say down the hallway, my mom and dad's room, the shitter, then my room was at the end of the hallway. That way it's clear. We're not trying to assume that you're halfway through this podcast, you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Is it the shitter or is it his bedroom? So mom's room, mom and dad's room, the shitter, my room in the hallway. Okay. So like I said, I was like 2 years old when we moved into this house, 2 or 3 years old when we moved into this house. And from what, again, I don't remember this, but this is stories that were told by my mom and dad, by my Aunt Sharon, rest in peace, Aunt Sharon, and my Uncle Bill, rest in peace, Uncle Bill. They would come over and say, "Oh yeah, I was over here when this happened," and then my Aunt Sharon, "Well, I was over here when this happened," and my Uncle Bill, "Well, I was there when this happened." So yes, the stories is a third party story, but they're from reliable sources. My family, and I don't know how reliable my family is, or like every other family, we're a little bit, batshit crazy. But I have never known to lie, except for one time my mom told us, and I think I mentioned this before. My mom told me that I was related to Jim Morrison from The Doors and John Wayne, even though John Wayne's real name was Marion Morrison, and that's my mom's maiden name, Morrison. So growing up, I always, thought this, we were, related to Jim Morrison and John Wayne. Like, holy crap, yeah, yeah, well, I have, famous families. But then a couple of years ago, she just out of the blue says, "Oh yeah, I used to tell everyone that we were related to Jim Morrison and John Wayne, but we're not." And I'm like, what? My whole childhood was a freaking lie because you told me this? So yeah, at least one time I know that she did lie to me, and that was about that. So assuming that that was the only lie, we'll give her one lie. So everything else she said was true. So that being said, the things that mom said happened in this house was small stuff. It wasn't like what you would see on TV now, where blood was coming from the walls, axes flying through the wall and hitting somebody in the head and killing them. It wasn't like that. Mom said it was small stuff. She said it would like you would hear voices and you would hear footsteps and see shadows, but it wasn't threatening. It wasn't like, oh my God, we have to move because I'm hearing, whatever. It wasn't like that. It was just, the small, like most real hauntings are. It's the small stuff, the subtle stuff, the stuff that if you, I guess it'd be easily to be shoot off, easily to be dismissed as, oh, my imagination, or, dismissed as I'm imagining it, whatever, or I thought I heard this, but I probably didn't. So that's how it was. It wasn't, like I said, obvious. It wasn't like, again, like, things flying, blood from the walls, or it wasn't anything like that. Mom said that one time she was in the kitchen. I'm sorry, in the living room. I think she said she was folding clothes or something, and the living room and the hallway heading down towards the bathroom and our actual bedrooms was hardwood floors. So mom said that you could hear, the footsteps quite easily. So mom said at one time, and I like I said, I think she was watching TV and folding laundry in our living room, and the hallway, it was separated by a wall until you come down into the living room, and then it opens up into the living room. So if you have someone coming from like my room at the end of the hallway, and you can hear the footsteps coming. You do not see anybody until they turn the corner into the living room from the hallway. So mom was like I said, she was on the living room, on the couch, on the south side of the living room watching TV. The front door would be behind her and to the right. And if she turned her head, she could see the end of the hallway and into their room. So mom said that she's sitting there, watching TV, folding laundry, and she hears footsteps, coming down the hallway towards the living room. And mom, my dad wasn't home, so mom was like, "Who the hell is this?" Because there's nobody home, and she turned to look to see who was coming. The footsteps stopped, and there wasn't anybody there. She said that the footsteps, she could hear them coming, turning to the living room, but as soon as they hit the living room, the footsteps stopped. So that was one thing that kind of freaked her out. And then she said that, like I said, I was a kid, and she would, rock me, how parents are when they, rock kids to sleep. And mom said that she would, rock me, hold me, fine, whatever. And I would, I would, obviously fall asleep. And she said that when she would put me into my own bed, as soon as she, laid me down, I would immediately wake up and start crying. So mom said she thought that was kind of odd. And she goes, I don't know if it was the room itself that you as a kid was, you know how it is, kids and animals can see things that adults can't. Not everybody, not every kid or every dog or cat or bird, whatever, can see things that adults can't. There are some kids, obviously, and dogs that can see things, spirits. So mom's not sure if the spirits, if whatever it was in the house was, screwing with me in my room, because as soon as she put me down, I would start crying. She picked me back up, took me to her bedroom, rocked me in the chair, I would fall asleep again. And as soon as she went, walked down the hallway, put me in my own bed, in my own room, I would start crying again. So that was one thing that happened. And the other thing that mom said that happened was her and dad were in the kitchen, and they heard sound. Mom described it as having like two animals in the basement having a fight. And mom said it wasn't like two cats. It wasn't like two, small cats or two dogs, whatever. She said it sounded like two animals, like, lions or tigers were having a fight in the basement, growling, hissing, scratching, things being broken. So mom, asked dad to go downstairs in the basement and see what it was. And dad goes, hell no, I ain't going down there. I can't say that I don't blame him. But after the growling and all those sounds stopped, I guess he got up enough courage, and he went downstairs, in the actual basement, and there wasn't anything there. He said there was no animals, there was nothing out of place, it wasn't anything broken, and there was no way to get in or out of the basement except for through the kitchen. There was no, there wasn't any back door, there wasn't any, like hole that an animal made and they crawled in or out. So that was kind of freaky, I guess. Again, I don't remember. I was young. And then mom said that they always, they didn't always, but they would see shadows, like somebody, like if mom's watching TV or in the living room, she would see like a shadow on the wall. The shadow was like heading towards the doorway for the kitchen, and from right to left. And mom said you would see like a shadow or a silhouette of somebody walking, but they were walking, but there wasn't anybody there. Like no, no physical body. You could see, you could see the shadow on the wall, but there was nobody casting that shadow that mom could see. And mom said, and have been doing investigations for a long time. We have this too. Is a lot of times people would contact us and say that we heard a loud crash in our living room or something, and shortly after that, the activity started. Well, that happened in this spook house. Mom said she was in the kitchen and alone, except for me, and she heard a loud crash coming through our living room. And the house, I mean, it's a small town. It's like 500 people back then. It's probably even smaller than that now. But the whole town was like 500 people, 540 people. Well, our house was at a T. So if you can imagine a T intersection, we were at the T, or we were on the road that went into the T. So to the right of our house was the straight road, and then in front of our house was the road that went to the T to that straight road. So mom thought, a car or a truck, turned the corner off that, the straight road, turned the corner, sped up too fast or whatever, lost control and came into our living room. And mom said that she went into, and she says it's a loud crash. And she goes, I went into the living room expecting to see a car in our living room, the wall damaged, furniture thrown all over the living room. She said that she walked into the living room and there wasn't anything out of place. There wasn't a car or truck in our living room. There was no physical damage that she could see. There was nothing but that loud bang. Well, I guess the beginning of the end, as they always say, in sports, the beginning of the end of this picture. The beginning of the end of us being in this house was my dad worked on third shift, and he worked in Lansing, so it's just about a 45-minute drive from our house. So he would leave because he worked a third shift, so he would leave 11 o'clock at night, and he would mom would open the door, he would leave, and then she would lock all the doors from the inside. Well, one time he was sleeping because obviously he works third shift, so it was in the afternoon, he was sleeping, and mom was in the kitchen cooking lunch, I think she had said. And my dad goes, Shirley, what do you want? And my mom goes, what do you mean, what do I want? He goes, someone was at the end of our bed, and they had their foot on the mattress, and they were shaking up and down on the mattress trying to wake me up. And I thought it was you wanting me to get up for something. She goes, no, I'm in the kitchen. I've been in the kitchen this whole time. So somebody was pushing down the bed trying to get my dad to wake up, and he thought it was my mom, but my mom was in the kitchen. So that was like the beginning of the end. And like I said, when my dad would leave at 11 o'clock at night to drive down to Lansing, mom would close all the windows and the doors from the inside. Well, when she would get up in the morning, all the doors and windows were not wide open, but they were unlocked, and you can only unlock them from the inside. So mom was kind of freaked out about it. Like, how is these doors becoming this way? So my uncle Bill came over one evening after my dad had left. Actually, I think he came over before my dad had left, and he was going to spend the night in the house because mom was all freaking out and stuff. And he slept on the couch and mom slept on the floor. That was her choice. She's a very stubborn person. She's like, you sleep on the couch, Bill. I'll sleep on the floor, no problem. So it wasn't like he says, I'm taking the couch, Shirley. No, no. Mom told him to, take the couch. I'll sleep on the floor. And mom said about she said 3:30 in the morning, she woke up and she goes, I was awake. She goes, I wasn't dreaming this. She goes, I rolled over and there was this old dude on his hands and knees looking at me. And if that wasn't enough to freak her out, mom said that I could see through him. He was transparent. And then she goes, I blinked my eyes a few times and he was gone. And she goes, I know I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't still dreaming. It happened. Well, my grandmother came over, which is my mom's mom, and my mom told her, what had happened, and described the old dude that she had seen on his hands and knees, looking at mom. She described what he was wearing. And my grandma, her mom, said that it was the dude that owned the house before us. He passed away in the house, and that's what he was wearing when he died. What mom saw him wearing when he was on his hands and knees looking at her was what he was wearing when he died. Now, if I had some kind of music on here, like spooky music, I would play that now. So that, that's freaky. So needless to say, shortly thereafter we moved out. Surprise, we moved out. Well, we moved across the street and like two houses up the road. And mom said that we had moved in there. Again, I don't remember any of this stuff. Mom said that they moved in, and my dad was at work, and she heard something from the kitchen. She said, "Oh God, whatever the spirit was, if it followed us over to this new house." No, it was the cat. The cat had knocked over some Pepsi bottles over in the kitchen, so the spirit did not follow us there. So we moved to the old house, and we had lived there for the house that we moved into after the other one. 51 years, did not have any experiences there whatsoever. However, one time I did hear, I was home alone, and in our basement in the house that we were there for 54 years, it was the two houses after the spook house. I did hear a loud crash in our basement in that house, and mom had a lot of canning jars, and I thought it was, some of the canned goods fell off the shelf. So I ran downstairs in the basement, and there wasn't anything out of place. From that point on, didn't really experience anything in that house. Being in my room, I had a closet had my own door that went into like a walk-in closet kind of thing, and that closet gave me the heebie-jeebies. I will admit it. It kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. It's like I didn't I felt like something was going to come out of that closet, but it didn't ever come out. So so growing up, this was back before the internet and all this kind of stuff, where you actually had to read books. I would get every book that I could about haunted houses, haunted locations, ghosts, poltergeist, anything that I could get my hands on because of the experience in the spook house. That's basically how I got interested in the paranormal. And I remember the picture that I saw, and I'm sure many of you have seen this. It was over in England. It was the Brown Lady. Some photographer back in the, God, I don't even remember when it was, 60s or 70s, caught a picture of what they call the Brown Lady coming down this staircase in some mansion in the UK. And I remember that's the first picture that I like, holy shit, this is cool. I want to do this. So, long story short, I served 4 years in the Marines. I graduated high school, obviously. 4 years in the Marines. Was out in California for a while. Came back here. Well, I ended up working here in Lansing. This was I've been in my current position 26 years, so this was at least 30 years ago easily. I mean, very easily. I was working third shift, and we had internet back then. And I was at work on third shift, and it was boring on third shift. You had like 2 hours of work for the whole night, and that was it. So I was on the internet, and I think I did a search for Michigan ghost hunters or Michigan ghost groups or something to that effect to bring up anything that was in Michigan. And this group, SEMGHS, was the Southeast Michigan Ghost Hunter Society, came up. It was like one of the third or fourth ones. I'm like, oh, cool. There's actually a group here. This is right in my wheelhouse. I've always had an interest in the paranormal. That's how it started. Was with the spook house. And as I was growing up, anything I could read about the paranormal, any movies, I could watch. Amityville Horror, the first one. The rest of them sucked. Anything that's paranormal, I was into now because of the spook house. So I joined, and I was accepted. Yay! And they were doing an investigation. I don't even remember where they were doing the investigation at. It was a graveyard, and I signed up for that. And before we could even do the first one, the group, I guess, disbanded. I guess broke up. Um, Troy was the person that founded the Southeast Michigan, hence, Southeast. I'm in Lansing. If you know anything about Michigan, Lansing's in the center of the state. Southeast Michigan would be down by, Troy, Howell, not even Howell, Detroit, Troy, in that area. Well, he lived in Troy, Michigan, so hence the Southeast Michigan. Well, he was moving back to Illinois, his home state. At least it wasn't Ohio. If he lived in Ohio, I would not have taken the group, just out of principle. We don't like Ohio people. And if you are listening from Ohio, I do like you, but I do not like your state. And it's a friendly rivalry. So he goes, I'm moving back to Illinois and wanted to know if anybody wanted to take over the group. And I'm like, here I am, naive as hell. I don't know anything about, what equipment, about websites, HTML, nothing about that, man. I was greenhorn, man. I was a virgin. I did not know nothing about it. So I'm like, yeah, I'll take it over, dude. And he's like, okay. So and then he sent me like all the pages HTML, and I had to figure that out all by myself. I had to figure out how to host it and all that stuff. And I didn't have only equipment we had was a camera. That's how we freaking had was a camera, man. A film camera. We didn't have any EMF meters. Didn't have any video cameras. No laptops. Nothing. We just had a regular film camera. So, that was 1996 is when I took over the group. So my math might have been a little bit older. It was more like 28 years, 29 years when I found Southeast Michigan Ghost Hunter Society. So, and ever since we've had it. But that's where I got started. That's where my interest started. Was like I said, was this, and again, I'm asked this at our presentations at least once in the presentation, because we always have Q&A afterwards. So I always get at least asked that at least once, per investigation. So it all started with the spook house, and then that translated into trying to find a group, and then growing up, in my teens and high school, reading everything I could, watching all the movies about the paranormal, all the documentaries on TV about the paranormal, anything about ghosts, I was enthused about, and that's basically how I got into paranormal, and then that's how we got into the group. But kind of funny though is that the spook house, is still obviously standing still. It's still there, and mom knows the owner or knew the owner, and the owner has been there ever since we moved out, and they have not experienced one thing paranormal. And so, I mean, that just proves that you can't flip the switch on or off to have paranormal. And basically, like I said, we were there for that. I think we were there for like, I think 6 months, 7 months maybe, and we moved out. The activity was not scary. It just got to be too much. Just like when you're constantly hearing, footsteps, constantly, seeing shadows, and hearing the animal noises and all that kind of stuff. And then I guess the final straw is when mom saw that dude, the old dude, on his hands and knees, looking at her. That was the final, draw. But so, anyways, yeah. So that's how I got started in and with the paranormal. And I know you're like, dude, this is kind of like boring, but it's just I have been asked this before, and that's how I got interested. So, you know, talked a little bit about the spook house, but boring or not, that's it. I had no, I wasn't, I was not. I'm sorry, there wasn't any more exciting story how I got into paranormal. It was like, my mom and dad were famous, ghost hunters, and I got the ghost hunting bug from them. No, just We live in the spook house. I had an interest. I've had it since then. And this is where we're at. Listening to me talk about it on my podcast. So that's about it. And again, I have a good weekend. I'm going to close now. Have a good weekend. And remember, if all goes as planned, this upcoming weekend at 12 o'clock noon on the 20th, our daughter is going to be either here live or she's going to be calling in from her house. Hopefully calling in from the house. That way she don't have to drive over here, even though she doesn't really drive, live that too far away. But just, convenience. We're going to talk about the Duran train station, the experiences she had upstairs on the third floor ballroom. It is kind of cool. It is kind of interesting. So again, 12 o'clock high noon on the 20th, a week from today, we're going to try to go live. Appreciate it. Tell everybody that you might be interested in the paranormal. Call in or just listen and call in if you have any questions. Because I think it'd be kind of cool to say, oh, I have a caller, Jimmy from Houston. What question do you have? That would be freaking cool. I've never had that experience before, so I think it'd be kind of cool. So anyways, again, on the 20th, a week from today at 12 o'clock noon, our daughter's going to be live, either here or from her house, talking about the Duran train station episode experience. Stuff that happened there. All right. So as usual, in closing, until we meet again, please stay away from the light. And until we see you a week from today, bye-bye. Oh, I'm sorry. And thanks for listening, because that's important. Thank you for listening. Now I can say bye-bye.